This podcast is hosted by Sheza Barbour, co-founder of Good Tree Institute, and joined by licensed therapist Archie Aquino and our resident scholar and founder, Dr. Nadia Qatranji.
Welcome back to another episode of Timeless Conversations with Good Tree Institute. Today we're going to keep continuing our conversation about the story of Surat Yusuf. And I think where we left off last time was the confrontation when Yusuf met with the wife of the Aziz, and there was the drama that ensued of her wanting to, seduce him and bring him close. And so we're going to have this conversation about that drama and what took place and kind of dig into that a little bit more as it relates to even present times and situations that many of us face, even in current times in those types of sticky situations. So let's go back to the surah and kick it off.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So inshallah, what happened where we left off, just to kind of like bring you back to the Quranic aspect of it, we're just going to start from there. Where we left off is where Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam said no. That's when it was clear for him, despite the fact that he was into her. However, he was like, I would not do something like this, whether it's to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I cannot betray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I cannot betray even her husband. It could address his husband. So he basically wanted to leave. So here is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captures that aspect of it. So here's what he said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابَ, and they raced to the door. وَقَدَّتْ قَمِيصَهُ مِنْ دُبُرٍ, and she basically tore his shirt from the back. وَأَلْفَيَا سَيِّدَهَا لَدَى الْبَابِ, and they both found her husband at the door. So now at this point, she looked at her husband and she said, قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا. What is the recompense? What's the consequence? What's the punishment for somebody who intended bad with you, for your family? إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم, except that this person is going to be imprisoned or have a painful punishment. So obviously, clearly, what did she do? She right away falsely accused Yusuf alayhi salam to get herself out of the situation, because it was like obviously very clear. So now at this point, Yusuf alayhi salam spoke, and here's what he said. قال, he said, هي راودتني عن نفسي. She's the one who seduced me about myself. So he stood for himself. Now each of them basically from the point of view of the husband, each one is saying something, and one of them is going to be the truthful one. So now somebody else came into the scene and kind of like wanted to help to figure this out. So he said, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا, and a witness testified from her family, from her own side. He said, إِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ قُبُلٍ فَصَدَقَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So if his shirt was torn from the front, then she is telling the truth, and he is the one who is lying. وَإِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ فَكَذَبَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. And if his shirt was torn from the back, then she's the one who is lying, and he is from among the ones who are truthful. So, of course, we know that his shirt was torn from the back. So, when the Aziz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, when the Aziz looked and he saw, فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ, when he saw that his shirt was torn from the back, قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. He said, this is from your plot. Definitely your plot is great. And he's speaking kaydakunna here. He's talking like plural feminine. He's just like, oh, you women, that's from your plotting. Definitely your plot is very like real. It's really impactful. So that's what he said to his wife. He said, oh, you're just like did this. And then he turned to Yusuf and he said, Yusuf أعرض عن هذا. Yusuf, just turn away from this. Just don't talk about this. Don't address it. We know you're the one who is being blamed and you're wrongly accused, but you know what? We're just going to cover this up. Don't talk about it. Turn away from this. واستغفري لذنبك, and ask forgiveness. Now he looked at his wife back, and he said, and ask for forgiveness for your sin. إنك كنت من الخاطئين. Definitely, you were among the ones who did wrong. So there are several aspects here. One of the things that we wanted to definitely look into later, which is from the perspective of Yusuf alayhi salam. He's being put in this situation, and he's being basically wrongly accused, right? So that we're gonna kind of like look at it later as once the whole story is finished in terms of this particular interaction. But let's just look at the Aziz's, the husband's reaction, where he looked at her and said, this is from your plot. Yusuf, just turn away from this. Don't do this. Don't talk about this. And then he looked at her and he said, oh, you should just ask for forgiveness for your mistake. I was wrong. What do we think about this? This is kind of highlighting something really big in terms of when we talk about the spouse relationship, husband and wife relationship, and see what we can get out of it, even to look for ourselves.
I think it's just weird how he just was so logical about it and had no strong feelings. It was just like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and no emotion. It was like either he's enlightened or he's disconnected. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you have a situation of clear betrayal, like in this sense, there's flying emotions, right? People get really upset. I mean, rightfully so. Like, you expect explosions of emotions and, but this is like, I don't know. It's an interesting, because we only have these facts, right? So we don't have the full story. We don't have, I mean, sort of like the details of what their relationship is like. We're kind of reading between the lines, but it almost indicates, just with even just sitting and listening to the story, it's very dramatic, right? And so you expect a very dramatic answer, an outburst from it, but it's very calm and collected, and it's just like, all right, here's what we're going to do, and it does hint to like what's going on with this marriage.
Yeah.
If you're that calm and collected about it, and you aren't.
And wouldn't there be a possibility that he's just containing his anger because he wants to basically preserve his reputation? He wants to kind of like, oh my God, like now what's on the line is my image, and I want to make sure that this gets contained, because. And that's what people do, right? People in positions like that, who are famous, who are celebrities or political figures, they want to make sure that these kinds of things just are contained. They don't get out of the box. So you know what? Let's just deal with it from that perspective.
I mean, that's great for his reputation as a public figure. But if you react that way in your marriage, I've done some couples sessions where this is the real problem. It's like the guy is responding logically. He's not communicating his emotions, and it creates some anxiety with his wife, because the wife is like, it kind of gets interpreted as, you don't really care. Like, look what I did, and all you're doing is this. You're talking about logic, and you're like a robot, and it's kind of like this. There's a lack of affection, a lack of emotional connection, and it reminds me of this one particular couple I had where they said, "Oh, we never argue for 10 years. We've always had, a perfect marriage. We never have arguments and conflicts." And then there they were in my office for couples counseling, and the real problem was because they don't argue, and the husband refused to communicate his feelings. It just, like, over time accumulated into this big problem, and she was being neglected emotionally.
And I've seen, absolutely true, and I've seen even the other way around, where of course it was from the end of, like, the husband was the one who betrayed, and basically what happened is that he put that thing is that I'm guilty in that relationship, and I'm just trash, and she was treating him this way, like nothing you can do that this mistake can be forgiven. And they acted this way. They kept the marriage going because, of the kids, but it was constantly this communication of like, you're basically, that's it. You're doomed to always to be the wrong person, and no matter what you do to me is not going to work, and I'm entitled at this point. And he is on the other hand, is being always guilty. Now, we're not saying that he wasn't wrong, but it was just not addressed.
Yeah, that's the real issue, is like we're skipping over the emotions. The real problem's not getting discussed. We're just going straight to the solution, right? And if you don't really do that in any relationship, whether it be your marriage or a friendship, whatever, you're going to have some sort of problem where the same problem doesn't get addressed, doesn't get resolved, and it's just it has a high percentage of repeating.
Yeah. And another thing that's interesting, I mean, I'm not going to downplay, this is a very high level of kind of like betrayal and something that really stabs the relationship. I understand that, but sometimes with things that are way less than that, marriages can be impacted, and you don't address them, you don't deal with them. It could be a word that somebody says, it could be a certain reaction that happened, and you just don't deal with it, and you take an attitude, you make an assumption, and you just have a certain attitude towards a person, and then you just live your life like that.
Yeah,
so that's also
real passive aggressive kind of thing. The resentment's there, but you don't really deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's important that we're bringing this up because I think most times when we discuss the story of Surat Yusuf, this whole section of the story is never discussed. It just jumps right into, well, she seduced him, and then he went to jail, and that's it. But we don't get a chance to really dig into this situation of like, well, why did this happen in the first place? Like, how did it
why is
get
she
to this
looking outside
point?
of this? Why is she
Right.
going outside the marriage? She's married to this real, public figure. He's a great guy, and she still wants to find something somewhere else.
Yeah. There's clearly something missing in that relationship that she, and granted, Yusuf is, and like most of our like prophets are like, they're charismatic. I mean, Yusuf was just Prophet Yusuf was just a extraordinary human being. So I'm sure, it's not hard to fall in love with these prophets, right? If you're that close. But here, there's like a real life situation that I think a lot of people, whether they're married, and I like that fact that we're discussing it, because usually we discuss the story with the perspective of Yusuf and as a single person, right, and the temptations. But here we're also looking at it from the perspective of the wife, right, and the perspective of the Aziz, of like, there's a married side of it too, right? There's a marriage aspect, and there's temptations that can happen, and how do you protect yourself, your marriage, but also protect your deen while you're in a married situation. Like, these are real situations. And I think many of us have seen life examples, like, even if they're Muslim, that there have been betrayals. There are lots of examples of failed or loveless marriages that we either through friends or family, like, you're kind of helping people through this. And Archie, as a counselor, I know you see it too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's important to address all these issues and really address, how do you not just either save your marriage or fix it, or maybe there's times when you do walk away if it's if it's the right, for sure. I mean, there's definitely scenarios where people do have to walk away if you cannot save the marriage or it's something that's unsolvable. But it's important that we address these issues.
Totally. And I do think that you hit 2 points here, and I think it's important to highlight both. The first one being that when you're looking outside, that means there's something, that the marriage is not being nourished, and that is a responsibility on both sides. You gotta make sure that this love, the first reason why you got married to this person, you have to keep reigniting it. It does not come spontaneously, because later on, as you come in life, other things start happening, and that first understanding of each other starts kind of going down when you start seeing other people's faults, and you start, like, it becomes more magnified versus and your actual love and respect for that person starts kind of taking a back seat. So you are responsible to making sure that this constantly is brought to the forefront. What's more important to me? These little things that are annoying me, or whatever faults that person has, or who he is for me or who she is for me. You have to constantly keep doing that. You have to constantly keep looking at where is the more important aspect. We magnify very little things and we make them this big thing, and we forget like the actual real genuine relationship and love that we had with that person. And we forget that, hey, guess what? Just like how he is so annoyed of you, you are so annoyed of him or her in certain aspects, and they kind of like they get on the other person's nerve. Guess what? The other person has the same thing about you. You're not an angel.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what I tell myself all the time. Yeah.
you bring up an important thing that a lot of young people aren't told these days for some reason is that like these things don't happen automatically. Like the romance and the happily ever after part of
Mm-hmm.
marriage doesn't just sustain itself magically. It requires nurturing. It requires effort, and you have to keep working at it. And people just think, oh, I found this person, we're so happy together, we do all the same things, we're having so much fun, let's get married. And then when life gets real, a year or two into the marriage, and they're having to deal with real problems, they don't know how to do that part where they what you're saying, they look at, remember who you married, and their good parts. Don't just focus on what they're doing that's annoying you in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah. And to me, the biggest part that I always remind myself, this is reciprocal. Just
Mm-hmm.
like how I and get annoyed of certain things, the other person gets annoyed of the same things, of other things that I'm not even clear about, that I don't even notice. It's
Yeah,
extremely important to keep this understanding clear. The other
humility,
one,
you got to be
yeah,
humble.
yeah, totally. And the other point that I also, which is extremely important, the aspect that you mentioned, Shaza, which is Yusuf alayhi salam being charismatic, right? And sometimes you're in your marriage and you encounter this person that is you're attracted to, or that you really like their personality, or you like how they talked, or something, right? And in our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he addresses these aspects in the Quran, when he addresses the relationship between both genders, there's the thing that he puts always over and over and over. He uses the word wattaqullah, and
Mm-hmm.
be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be cognizant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because yeah, I mean, you might have some feelings, you might have something might encounter. It's your job, it's your responsibility to right away notice this emotion and stop. And you could say, I can't. Yes, you can. You can stop yourself from
Mm-hmm.
going further in this conversation with this particular person who you're starting to feeling that you're attracted to. You have to save that your marriage. You have to save your original relationship. You can't go and just run around and, oh yeah, well, I fell in love. I love that person. I'm got attracted to them. You don't fall in love right away. There is an attraction. When you see yourself being attracted to the other gender, a person who you're not married to, you can't just go and continue. I remember a friend of mine who she's a person who fears God, and she's a Rabbani person, like really, she's a person who cares about Allah, her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She was in college, and she had a professor who was married, and she just loved his charisma, his approach, his values, his character. So she basically really fell in love with him. She just loved him, and she wouldn't know what to do. Like, he's married. I don't want to ruin his marriage. I don't want to get into this thing. So she started really asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help her with this. And she said she would just like get up in the night and pray and ask, Ya Rabbi, just get this out of my heart. I don't want this to happen. And she would start avoiding times when she would have an individual interaction with him. She would do it kind of like in a different way. She would start sometimes avoiding, for instance, attending lectures. I'm not saying this is ideal, but she had to deal with it. And she would not be in a place where people are talking so greatly about him until time after time after time, she was able to just detach herself from that and not act on it. That's the part that people a lot of the times really downsize. They don't understand that you actually have a say in your emotions, how they progress. When you start saying them, please stop.
Yeah, we in counseling, that's what we emphasize. It's like things don't just happen. The only things you have real control over in life are how you react to things. And you're people who justify doing all sorts of things,
Mhm.
just they're like, oh, the heart wants what the heart wants, and
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
passive kind of perspective on life, and then they just justify doing the things that they are supposed to have values against doing.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's element of just not taking responsibility of their actions. Like you're saying, like it's like, well, the heart wants what the heart wants, and we live in a time and in society, which I'm sure is unlike other times in history, where it's just like you just go after your emotions. You just go after, this is what I need right now and what I want, and it's all your ego talking and not really talking about the consequences, being responsible, being accountable for everything that's going to happen after you default and go off and, seek something
Yeah.
else. And I mean, this is a real, if we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this. This is a real problem in our community these days. We have issues where there's secret relationships, there's secret marriages going on, and it's not being dealt with. And families are falling apart from it. And we're not talking about all of the issues that surround it, from the aspect of betrayal to the aspect of, well, then how do we help people refocus? Why did this happen? And how do we bring families back together again or seek the counseling that they need
Hmm.
for whether it's marital counseling, but also, other counseling that is necessary for people that are dealing with other issues that cause people to go outside of their marriages, whether that's porn addiction, sex addiction, just wanting to find other, having those midlife crisis or whatnot, and just wanting to find something else to, you know, that they think is going to solve some problem, but it's all internal, right? And if you can't fix this, then, you know, your relationships, whether they're marital relationships or your relationships with your kids and your families, isn't going to be fixed. It's not going to just magically fix itself, right?
Yeah. As a convert, like I'm new to the idea of the polygamy thing and multiple marriages, but I as a counselor, it makes me think that instead of solving the marriage that they have,
Mm-hmm.
the person tries to move into a new marriage to try to find something that's lacking in the first marriage that they weren't able to really address. And so this is like a band-aid, and they just keep on trying to add more and more spouses to distract from the fact they didn't really address the problem with the first spouse. But I don't know what's the Muslim perspective on this.
That's so true. That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a lot of our scholars used to address it exactly as you're saying. When somebody just like seeks, well, I found this marriage and new marriage, and I want to kind of like, I'm not really satisfied with my first one. Well, that's exactly what they would tell them. They would tell them, hey, listen, guess what? In a few years, that's what you're going to say about your second marriage.
Yep.
You're not dealing with it powerfully. That's not the reason why polygamy is there. It's just not to run away from, oh, yeah, well, you have the right. If you're really not so happy with your marriage, you can keep it and then you can move on. That's not the reason. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, in the non-Muslim world, there's the guy who has like four ex-wives. you know? It's a
Or
serial
mistresses.
problem.
Or
That's
yeah.
a
mistresses,
serial.
exactly. Hidden mistresses, exactly. And
Yeah.
this is so, more, I mean, extremely common, and especially with those who are with high pay income men. It's like, no, well, yeah, I mean, they have this face wife, and then there's all these what they call the chicks, right? It's just like, yeah, well, I have to have my fun side, and they're totally cool with it.
Yeah, they have this business arrangement with the first wife for the public image.
Yeah.
She's
Exactly,
the trophy
exactly.
wife. She's the one who's gonna, have the kids. But then they also have the mistress, and that's the person that they might even have the real affection for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is happening right now. in our Muslim communities. I mean, I know of numerous stories, people that I know firsthand that are dealing with this, and are struggling through it because there's these secret relationships out there. But for the, the idea of just, well, we have to keep the family together for the, whatever it is, whether it's fear of what society and the community is going to say, or just not knowing how to deal with it, feeling trapped. You're in this loveless marriage, and you're just dealing with it as a contractual relationship while somebody else is going around and having all kinds of relationships outside. And what I've realized, and I mean, time and time again, is that it never works. Secrets are never secrets forever, and kids always find out. And then the kids are the ones that are devastated. And they're the ones that are dealing with all this trauma of like, what the hell happened, and how did this happen to our family, and where did this all go wrong? And that starts affecting how they even view marriage and relationships going forward. So, these are things that are very real in our community. And I don't feel like we as a community talk about it enough in a powerful way to address the root of it and really get to the, how do we have powerful marriages that are full of love, full of deen, full of iman, and in a way that's like where we're centered on, Allah as our first and foremost, like this is what's binding us together. It's our deen. And then, love comes from there, right?
Funny you should mention that, because I think that when people, for the sake of public image, avoid conflict, avoid having these tough conversations, they're actually handicapping their marriage. They're disabling it from becoming stronger, because it's through these conflicts and getting through tough problems that the real trust starts to form, and the trust deepens. And when trust deepens, then love deepens. And when you don't do that, when you choose not to do that, your relationship remains very stale and stagnant.
And one thing I really want to reemphasize over and over is knowing the person, knowing in the marriage, knowing that it is, I can do this. I have the capacity to revive my marriage and keep it alive and keep love there. Because what takes love away is whatever you put in the space, the images that you have and the views that you have, the unsolved issues that you have, and the thought that you're thinking the other side is the problem. And if they solve their problem, then we're good. That's where the problem is. If you don't look at yourself as part of it, let me see what my role is. I remember one time with Jamal and I, we were talking and he was addressing an issue. And to me, it was in my head like 100%. It's like he did the wrong thing. When he was telling it to me from his perspective, I was blown away to see like, oh my God, it was my fault. It was hidden. It was a kind of like not so clearly my fault, but it was me. I was missing something in putting what's needed in this relationship, and I didn't do it, and I wasn't even aware of it. See, that's extremely important. I cannot emphasize enough on this. Don't think that it's not working because of the other side. Look at yourself. Look what can you do?
And it's not 100% either or.
Yeah.
It's both people have some part to play.
But yes, that's true. However, the moment you start saying, well, why doesn't that other side does their role, you have no shot. Focus on you. Don't worry. I'm telling you, if you focus on you and take care of your part, there is going to be an opening. But don't wait. It's like, okay, I'll focus on mine until they do theirs. Don't do that. Just like, okay, let me see what I can do. Things will shift. I promise you. Things will shift. And at one point, if things are not meant to shift, then there is a way out. But generally speaking, really be so kind of like focused on that particular aspect. One last thing I want to make sure that we kind of like don't step over is the aspect that you mentioned, which is the contractual marriages. And especially a lot of the times people might actually start marriage without that love. And this is not okay. It's not in our deen. It's not Islamic. And I don't want to say it's not okay. I mean, I think sometimes things do happen, but that's not the norm. Rasulullah ﷺ actually focused, he mentioned that, like, you have to see that there is that attraction. There has, just like, look, make sure that this connection is there. it doesn't have to be full-fledged love, but there has to be that, like, yeah, I can see myself with that person. I have an attraction towards that person. In our deen, there is a lot of these emotional aspects that somehow got dimmed down, and people think that it's all just transactional and contractual. It's really truly not. We're not going to get the chance to get so much into it, but if you really get into the seerah of the Prophet, the biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or even the way it's meant in the Quran, there's a lot of these details that we just step over and gloss over, that show and highlight the emotional aspect of it, and how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually wants us to express that.
Yeah. I think, just in conclusion of this, the whole of where we are in this part of of this story and this specific aspect, which is just talking about, this relationship between the wife of the Aziz and the Aziz, I think some important takeaways just to keep this real is just to really ask ourselves and our listeners to really focus on and look into how are they, dealing with their relationships, right? What are some um, support guidelines, like having people really look at their relationships, analyze it, see what's missing, see what we have to do ourselves. For those of us that are in married relationships, how to keep things going, and what are the things that we need to do first and foremost, like we always say at Good Tree, is like focus on yourselves and improving, your own, looking at your own flaws and your own accountability almost to the situation before
Hmm.
like delving into the other. But I think we should kind of, talk about that and just in conclusion of like, what are the things that we can give to, give to our listeners and those of us that might be in, might have dealt with sticky situations like this in the past, maybe are dealing with situations that might be similar, or, how to prevent this from happening, right?
So I think you have to have that ability to admit, like, there is a problem. Like, you have to
Mm-hmm.
first be willing to acknowledge that there's something missing, and instead of trying to figure it out on your own, like, there's no shame in going for help, and that could be from a professional, it can be from people whose
Right.
marriages are working, and ask them for advice. I mean, that's one of the things that we're supposed to do as a community, right? Is to advise people when they ask for help. And people are obligated to ask for help if they don't know what to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's we can't underestimate, we keep saying this at Good Tree, like always ask for help. There's no shame in it, and there's no reason to, sit by yourself in a corner trying to say, I can figure this out myself. Or I'll just deal with it and expect miracles to happen just on your own. Like there is an aspect of community, and we want our communities to thrive. We want our relationships to thrive. We want our families to thrive. And we have to do that together and give each other also the grace to, you know, to go through the tough times, because everyone is going to go through tough, challenging times in their marriages. But
Mhm.
then giving each other the grace of, well, how do we work through it? Like it's inevitable. I mean, I don't think I've known any couple that has not gone through a hard time, including, my parents and my aunt, like every family member I've known. Like if you talk to the elders now that they're older, they'll sit back and tell you, be like, well, yeah, there were times when we were on the brink of divorce, and this is what happens, and this is what, why, and whether it was stress or circumstances or something happened. But then they can, they share, well, but this is how we got through it. So it's, also being aware, I feel like, and realistic that every relationship is going to be is going to be challenged. And, you know, even Allah tells us in the Quran that, am I not going to test you with, your wealth, your health, your families, your kids? These are all tests. And so it's also working through these tests and having the grace to say, it's okay to have
Yeah.
bumps along the road, and
Yeah, there's no shame in it.
there's no shame in it. And it's not some fantasy like, oh, it's always full of love and butterflies and rainbows or something. No, you're going to be challenged to your core. And it's how do we, live up to those challenges and deal with them powerfully and, continue on to have thriving relationships and thriving families, right?
And going through this tough time is what makes the love stronger. And so one last part that I would add to everything that was said before is have with the marriage, like the couple, as you said, it's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's connected to a bigger cause. Like have something bigger that drives and keeps this relationship alive. It's not only just like, yeah, we're married. No, it's like there's something that's fueling this relationship.
Right.
You're working towards something together. You are aligned. Your purpose in life is together. Like here's something that you're both aligned to. I've heard it from so many people, and I same thing applies to me. It just makes a huge difference when that's there. So that's another piece to also look into. But just don't give up on it. Just don't give up on it.
Well, thank you everybody I feel like this conversation was really interesting. It's different than most conversations that we have about the story about Surah Yusuf. So I hope, our listeners also found it worthwhile. And, we look forward to the next episode, which will go back to, Nadia, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll go back to, Sayyidina Yusuf, and then what happens, the repercussions of this, dramatic interaction between the wife of the Aziz and Yusuf, and how he gets, blamed and framed, and then how his life, moves forward, just, because of this, what would we call it? An entanglement these days?
It's the modern term.
So inshallah, stick with us and join us again at our next episode. Assalamu alaikum.
If you like listening to our conversation about the Quran, imagine how much more you would get out of participating in a live conversation about the Quran with Dr. Nadia and a room full of people engaging with the Quran. Join us at our next in-person Seeds of Wisdom retreat, online with our weekly Quran and Me sessions, or for the youth at one of our Camp Z retreats.